Everyone talks about what decade has the best horror movies, but isn't that just a little too broad of a subject? What if we narrow it down? I've always been interested in what year has the best horror movies. Every year has at least one horror movie that's released that either redefines the genre or is a huge hit among fans and critics and becomes an instant classic. Some years are lucky enough to have two or even a handful of these movies, and then there are a few magical years where it feels like every horror movie that's released is either monumental or a landmark film. For whatever reason, the ancient ones or the elder gods bless certain years with a ripe, bountiful harvest. What year has the most horror movie hits? What year has the most consistently good or innovative spooky flicks? What year is the best year for horror? Now the answer will change from person to person. Certain years lean more heavily towards different subgenres. If you like classic black and white gothic horror based on literature, 1931 may be your year. If you want thought-provoking films that take a metaphorical look on the human condition, then 2014 may fit the bill. Almost any year could be considered the best year for horror, depending on your personal taste and what you enjoy. For me, 1981 is my favorite. If you like werewolf films, slashers, and early works from your favorite directors, then this year is the year for you. But it also packs a lot more than just that. It was a truly diverse year that obviously had trends, but felt wholly original. Making small, independent pictures was on the rise thanks to the success of films like The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, and Friday the 13th. We had people taking chances creatively, and we got a lot of unique and genre-defying moments. There are so many great films from 1981, it's hard to know where to start. So here's a list for you to check out immediately. These are the top 10 best horror films from 1981. Now who am I to judge? Well, a few years ago, I reviewed almost all of the horror films from 1981, so I know the best the year has to offer. If you want a deeper dive into any of these films, check out my standalone reviews. Now, two things before we begin. First, this list could have easily have been all slashers or all werewolf films, but I did my best to limit each subgenre to roughly one entry each. And even though you'll recognize a few of these entries, I have some movies on this list that not a lot of people know about, so it should keep even the most hardened horror fans on their heels. And the last thing, this list isn't in any particular order. These are just 10 horror movies that are totally worth your time. The Wolfman was huge throughout the 40s, but the trend really started dying down through the next few decades. From 1976 until 1980, there were only 3 werewolf films released. But in 1981 alone, there was 5. And some of these werewolf films from 1981 are regarded as some of the greatest werewolf films of all time. And the one that cements itself on our list tonight is An American Werewolf in London. It's a simple story of 2 American boys backpacking across Europe when they are attacked by a werewolf. The surviving boy now transforms into the wolf at night and picks off people throughout London. It's funny, lighthearted yet dark, and moody. There's romance, great music, and who could forget that awesome transformation scene? An American Werewolf in London is probably best remembered for its special makeup effects and werewolf transformation scene done by the brilliant Rick Baker. Baker won the first ever Academy Award for Best Makeup Effects for his work in this one. An American Werewolf in London is extremely watchable for all fans of cinema, and it has cemented itself as not only one of the best horror movies of 1981, but one of the best horror films of all time. If you like atmosphere, chills, and a mystery that will have you on the edge of your seat, then Dead and Buried may be the movie for you. Often overlooked and rarely appreciated, Dead and Buried is a slow, methodical chiller that is greatly aided by its location, performances, and special effects. Taking place in a small coastal town, we follow the sheriff as he investigates missing person cases. It seems that anytime someone travels to this town, they get murdered and end up disappearing. Something is very wrong in this town. The town folks seem to be in on it, and the conclusion will have you speechless. Dead and Buried boasts special effects from Stan Winston, the guy who brought you Jurassic dinosaurs to life. There's a needle scene in Dead and Buried that looks so real, and trust me, your mind will be blown when you find out how they actually pulled it off. You need to dig up and watch Dead and Buried. Americans weren't the only ones making kick-butt horror flicks in the early 80s. Italy was pumping out classics left and right, and one of the best Italians to ever do it was Lucio Fulci. Fulci was in his prime during this time and directed 3 films in 1981: The Black Cat, House by the Cemetery, and The Beyond. While I love all 3, The Beyond takes the top spot. Rich in Lovecraftian ideas, The Beyond elevates itself above a typical Italian splatter flick by introducing cosmic horror themes throughout. By accidentally opening a gate to hell, the characters in this one must survive zombies roaming the earth. The narrative is arguably pretty weak, but that's not the reason to watch this one. The imagery, dreamlike atmosphere, and gore are all top-notch in some of Fulci's best work. Don't think too hard while watching it, but instead take in the moments as if you were experiencing a waking nightmare on screen. Do you like ghosts? Do you like stories? Well, if you do, 1981's Ghost Story should suit you just fine. Based on a novel by the same name by famed horror author Peter Straub, the basic plot of Ghost Story revolves around elderly men who like to tell each other ghost stories. These men are bound together through more than just stories, as they have all committed a heinous act in their youth. Well, the ghost of their past begins to kill them off one by one, and it's up to one of their sons to solve the mystery before they all end up 6 feet underground. Think of a stereotypical ghost movie, Ghost Story pretty much comes to mind. It's a quintessential ghost movie. You have a haunted house, mystery, old characters that did something very bad in their youth, a vengeful spirit, an outsider who's connected to the story trying to solve the mystery, thrills, and spooks. While I think 1980's The Changeling is the best ghost movie of all time, Ghost Story isn't far behind and is the best thing 1981 has to offer in the way of spooky spirits. We have awesome gooey gore, wonderful performances, some genuinely creepy moments, and a satisfying conclusion. We also have the legendary Hollywood dancer Fred Astaire, who plays one of the elderly men in this film. While he's not moving much in this one, you'll be dancing in your seat due to all the ghostly goodness. In a time when horror movies in Hong Kong cinema were mostly light in tone and maybe a bit comedic or action-packed, The Imp came along and showed that Hong Kong horror was no joke and can be serious in tone. A husband is down on his luck. He's been jobless for some time, and his wife is expecting their first child. He has to provide for his new family, and luckily is able to get a job working security at a mall during the night shift. At first, things go well. He likes the job, he makes friends, but then sinister events begin to take place. His coworkers begin to die off, and his wife is becoming creepier and creepier. What unborn evil awaits the family, and can the husband even stop it? The Imp is a movie that still gives me nightmares from time to time. It's a beautiful movie with some stark cinematography, beautiful eerie lighting, and this guy. This guy terrifies me. The Imp is rather slow, but I guarantee the ending is worth it. The ending will be forever seared into my brain. Plus, we get this awesome dude and his humorous shirts. Am I a girl? No, I am a man. 1981 may be known best for its slasher films. Riding the coattails of Halloween and Friday the 13th, studio executives and anyone with a camera saw that slasher films were low risk and super high reward. Audiences were enamored by the trend, and we got so many great and influential slashers. This list could have easily have been all slashers, but I had to narrow it down to just one, and let's just say, that was really hard to do. My Bloody Valentine has all the keys to make a great slasher film. You have likable characters, a good compelling plot, a great setting, a memorable look for your slasher, proper motivation for your slasher, and fantastic gore. When I first saw My Bloody Valentine, I felt like something was missing, and there it was. The MPAA hated this one and made them cut out almost all of the gore. The footage was thought to be lost for years, but luckily most of it was found and rescanned back into the film, and now it finally feels complete. Slashers don't always need gore, but 9 times out of 10 it helps, especially if the movie's and director's vision was to have these set pieces. My Bloody Valentine takes place in a coal mining town where a terrible accident happened many years ago. The town tries to forget the past and hold a Valentine's Day dance instead, but a killer dressed as a miner is on the loose, picking off teens in gruesome ways. It blows my mind that there was never a sequel to this one. It's so good. There was a remake, but I prefer my slashers in 2D.
3D ride to hell.
Director David Cronenberg needs no introductions. He's a master of body horror and has made some of the best horror flicks of the 80s. The one that I find most mind-blowing is Scanners. I like to think of Scanners as almost a horror take on a dark superhero movie. You have certain people in this world that possess this telepathic ability. Some use this ability for good, others use it for evil. Through this ability, called scanning, you can read minds, influence people, and literally make their head go boom. The good scanners try to stop the bad ones, and you have some really awesome moments. It's clever, brutal, entertaining, and threatening. Michael Ironside steals the show as the main villain. Scanners is one of Cronenberg's best, and one of the best from 1981. Possession is the best movie from 1981. No, not just the best horror movie, it's the best movie. Possession is a living nightmare. It can make you feel things that you never wanted to feel. It's a dream where the logic can be hard to follow, but the emotions are so raw and unnerving.
I can't exist by myself because I'm afraid of myself, because I'm the maker of my own evil.
This movie is about doppelgangers and about a couple that split up. The performances from Isabella Johnny and Sam Neill are terrific, and the direction from Polish director Andrzej Zolonski is top-notch. This is cinema, and cinema has never been so frightening, strange, awe-inspiring, depressing, nonsensical, brooding, meaningful, and so perfect. Words cannot do this one justice. The subway scene, the thing living in the apartment, all of it is perfect. So this next one was actually chosen by you. There are so many great horror films from 1981 that I had a hard time choosing which ones I wanted to put on this list. So I picked 4 that I was torn between, and the horror community actually voted on them. And while the results were close, The Burning won the vote, and I'm glad it did. The Burning is yet another fantastic slasher that stands above many of the great slashers of the early 80s. The plot is a typical summer camp horror film, but it does a really great job at it. It actually feels like a camp. Friday the 13th just had adults getting ready for camp, but The Burning takes place in the middle of the camp season. You have kids of all ages, and it really adds to the charm of this one. You have a ton of likable characters and some that you will definitely hate. The killer is fantastic and was actually based on the real-life New York urban legend of Cropsey the Killer. Apparently this film was written before Friday the 13th, but it took a while for it to get funding, so it might not actually be the Friday the 13th ripoff that we all thought it was. Gore effects were done by the legendary Tom Savini. He's one of the best and most famous in the industry. You can say Tom Savini worked on a movie to a horror fan and they automatically want to see it. Savini actually did the special makeup effects on 4 films in 1981: The Burning, The Prowler, Eyes of a Stranger, and Nightmare. The Burning is wonderful stuff with a great camp setting, gory kills, likable characters, and a sense of fun throughout. The last third of the movie does falter a bit, but once Cropsey is revealed, all is forgiven. Cropsey is one face you'll never forget. Before we dive into the best horror movie from 1981, let's talk about some honorable mentions. Friday the 13th Part 2 and Halloween 2, two sequels to some of the biggest slasher franchises coming out in the same year, and these sequels are often regarded as some of the best sequels in their respected franchise. Halloween 2 made Michael Myers a slasher villain. If you ever see Michael slashing about, you have Part 2 to thank for that. And Friday the 13th Part 2 gave us Jason Voorhees, who was missing from the first one. Jason is an icon of the genre, and even though he didn't try out for the hockey team yet, this sequel still kicks major butt. The Howling has a legitimate argument to be the second best werewolf movie ever made. It's just unfortunate that it came out the same year as An American Werewolf in London. That is steep competition. The Howling is more serious and tends to lean on its moody atmosphere and scary tone. The special makeup effects are nothing to scoff at either. The transformation sequence is frightening and still jaw-dropping today. Again, it's tough to come out the same year and compete with the best werewolf movie ever made. House by the Cemetery is another Fulci classic. Plot? Who cares? It's all about the gore, imagery, and atmosphere. It's one of Fulci's best. Plus, there's Bob.
My name is Bob.
Everyone loves Bob. Bob is great. Bob is life. Okay, Bob sucks. This should come as no surprise. We're talking about one of the best and most influential horror movies of all time. Sam Raimi, the director of The Evil Dead, is the gold standard. Every up-and-coming horror director wants to have the career Raimi has had. Raimi started making low-budget horror movies with his best friends, and then his career took off. He's one of the top 20 highest-grossing movie directors of all time. Raimi's career all started here with The Evil Dead, and while it doesn't have the polish that his later films would have, The Evil Dead is filled with things that would make Raimi popular. The camera movements, the blocking of the shots, the over-the-top Three Stooge-esque choreography, and the building of a sequence and tension. Does the acting hold up? No. These people weren't actors yet, but still, the imagination, the awe-inspiring movie-making process is on full display. The Evil Dead is a simple story that took many elements from previous films, but the film uniquely makes it original. 5 young adults travel to a cabin in the woods to have a weekend getaway. They find the Necronomicon, the Book of the Dead, in the basement, and after hearing the reciting of the book, all hell breaks loose. One by one, they get possessed and mock the living. The only way to stop the Evil Dead is by body dismemberment. Some say that The Evil Dead 2 is better, and technically speaking, I agree, but I love the charm of the first one, the isolation of it all, the low-budget feel. It inspired many to grab a camera and to start filming. The Evil Dead is more than just a movie. It's an anthem to all inspiring filmmakers and the best horror movie from 1981. 1981 sure was a special year for horror cinema. Now, even though I am proud of this list, there's no doubt there's probably some of you thinking that some movies were wrongly omitted from this list, and you're probably right. That just goes to show how strong of a year it actually was. So in the comments below, let me know what your favorite horror film from 1981 was. And that's all I have for tonight. So thank you so much for watching, and stay spooky, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what I do and want to support the channel, please consider subscribing or by buying me a coffee in the description below. Any bit helps. Thank you, and take care.